Hey Mysterions, I'm Shay.
And I'm Jen.
And this is
Crimes, Cryptids, and Controversies. This is a weekly true crime and paranormal podcast where we work our butts off to surprise one another and our Mysterions each week with new knowledge. Sometimes we get excited and post more than once a week, so don't forget to subscribe and keep up with our random episodes. With that being said, let's explore.
In 1976, 26 children between the age of 5 and 14 were returning from a hot summer field trip at the Chowchilla fairgrounds swimming pool. They weren't too far from their destination when they were intercepted at gunpoint by three men named Frederick Newhall Woods, who was 24 at the time, his friend James Schoenfeld, who was also 24 at the time, and James's younger brother Richard, who was 22 at the time. All three men came from pretty affluent backgrounds and, by all accounts, would have zero reason to kidnap these kids for ransom. So what was the point of this seemingly senseless crime?
But first, news break. A nationwide search began on October 1st, 2022, when Chloe Campbell didn't return home after a high school football game. Chloe's parents, Jessica and David, began posting flyers around town. The couple told CBS News Colorado that they received a photo of Chloe through an anonymous source, with her father saying, quote, "She looked injured and unwell," end quote. Police said, quote, "While investigators continue to believe that Chloe ran away, there is an ongoing investigation about where she was and what occurred while she was separated from her family. Some details are being withheld at this time to allow for a thorough investigation," end quote. Chloe's parents were afraid that Chloe was kidnapped or trafficked and held against her will. Chloe's mother even made a public plea saying, quote, "Chloe, honey, we love you so much. You are not in trouble. If you can come home, please do. And if you can't, we will not stop until we find you," end quote. Fortunately, the 14-year-old, who was from Boulder, Colorado, was found at a home in Thornton, a city that is roughly 30 minutes away. Chloe appeared to have been avoiding contact with both law enforcement and her parents, but the cops working her case alluded to the fact that she was alive throughout the week that she was missing by saying, quote, "We have no belief at this time that she was held against her will," end quote. The cops later said that she did not have any, quote, "readily noticeable injuries," end quote, when she was located.
That gives Sherry Papini vibes.
Yes.
Who pretended to be kidnapped, got all the attention from the world that she didn't mean to get, and then went, oh shit. And now she's being investigated for fraud.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a 14-year-old, the other one was an adult, so.
Yeah, she fully should have known better as an adult. At 14, I too was running away and doing dumb shit.
That's really a hard thing because, I had a 14-year-old who did the same thing, and you always worry, and it could be that one time if the cops don't listen, something happened, but the adult, no excuse.
No.
And I hope Chloe's getting all the help she needs.
Completely agree. Peace and love, Chloe.
And now, back to the story at hand. So we have the three guys, Frederick, James, and Richard, and they decided to kidnap 26 children and the bus driver. So then we have Richard and James. They were sons of a prominent Bay Area podiatrist, or foot doctor.
Foot doctor?
Yeah.
According to the notes.
I wouldn't sound like I know what I'm talking about.
You know what? You were in the medical field, so you get this pass.
So all three of these 24-year-old, 22-year-olds lived in some of San Francisco's nicest suburbs. At one point, James told reporters that despite their parents' wealth, he and Fred had run up serious debts, and they had some real estate debts too, I think.
Yeah.
Quote, "We needed multiple victims to get multiple millions, and we picked children because children are precious. The state would be willing to pay ransom for them, and they don't fight back. They're vulnerable. They will mind," end quote. Kind of disgusting.
Yeah, kind of terrible. Kind of onto something, kind of bad.
The three men hijacked a bus with sawed-off shotguns, and I think two of them had pantyhose over their heads. And
that's scary looking, just in and of itself. I hate. They look like Squidward gone rogue.
And then the other one, I think, was following them in a vehicle.
Just farting around.
So they transferred these 26 children and the bus driver into a van, and then they drove these kids and the bus driver about 12 hours away, to Frederick's father's rock quarry. The three men then put the kids and the bus driver into darkened storage vans. They're like, we're talking the 70s. So these are like the moving truck storage van type things from the 70s, not like what we're thinking about today.
Yeah, you could hook up a van to the front of it and like drive around type storage van.
Right. And they made makeshift ventilation holes and toilets and put some food and water in there.
I do think I forgot to write down, these are underground, by the way, so keep that in mind, that these poor kids just got threatened with guns and then shoved underground into these horror houses, basically.
And obviously they weren't thinking about air supply.
Nope, not so much.
The kidnappers left to call in their $5 million ransom demand, which they expected the state would pay from a recently announced budget surplus. Unfortunately for them, things went downhill quick.
This is my favorite part. They're so stupid.
I feel like we're talking about a bunch of 12-year-olds.
Yeah, this feels fake. I feel like they had affluenza and just peaked at like 12.
I mean, at 24, you're thinking the state's just going to cut you a $5 million check?
For kids that, I'm sorry, they probably don't care that much about.
Well, but they aren't going to give you money and you're not going to get very far.
They're not going to enable your shitty behavior.
At the time that they were trying to call and demand their ransom, the phone lines were jammed with parents who were trying to figure out where their kids were and press inquiries, which made it pretty much impossible for them to call.
After about 16 hours of sitting in these trailers, bus driver Ed Ray and some of the older kids dug their way out of the trailer while the kidnappers slept. This took hours because they were underground, but eventually Ed and the kids got out of the bus, and all in all, it took about 28 hours for these people to sit and suffer with these kidnappers.
That's a long time. And they were running out of food and air at that point. I mean, because they were pretty much closed in.
Yeah.
So there was like manhole covers covering the top with dirt. One article said old industrial batteries. When
Ed and the older kids got the rest of the younger children out, they started kind of wandering around the rock quarry to get to safety, and they were spotted by, quote, stunned workers who ended up calling the police. Once the kids had escaped and the police were called, everybody was taken to the Santa Rita Rehabilitation Center, which was a jail in the area, because they wanted to make sure that the kids weren't coached basically by other people what to say and keep their witnesses like secure, essentially. So they dragged all the kids to this rehab center. Luckily, they were able to give the kids, quote, apples and soda, and the kids were taken in and examined by doctors to make sure that they were all good. The kids hung out for 4 hours waiting for their family to get there, and by the end of that 4 hours, the kids were able to get on yet another bus, but this time to go home to safety. The 3 men were arrested in the weeks following the kidnapping. They were initially sentenced to life in prison without parole, but an appeals court later changed the sentences to make the 3 eligible for parole.
How does that work?
I was wondering that.
I'm not really sure how that works, because like when you get sentenced to something, how can an appeals court change your sentence from a judge and a jury?
From what I understand, you appeal it with the intention of showing that you either got like an unfair trial or the punishment was too intense. So you can just be like, no, I don't agree with my ruling. Let me tell you why.
Interesting.
I mean, I'm not saying it's the greatest thing, but
I guess we are back to 1976.
Yeah.
So maybe the rules back then were different than now.
Oh no, you can still appeal sentences. I know a few people personally who have. So yeah. In 2012, Richard was paroled, and just 2 years later, in 2015, James was also paroled. Both had made the case to the parole board that they were no longer a threat to society, and they did basically recognize and reckon with the harm that they caused with their crime. So that's kind of how they were able to get, not out of it, but get out of it. Meanwhile, Woods spent the vast majority of his life in prison, where his disciplinary record reportedly included citations for running multiple unauthorized businesses from behind bars, because apparently in the state of California, you can run a business from prison. You just have to get permission from your, like the guards.
The warden?
Yeah.
So is that a 1976 thing? Are they still letting people run businesses in prisons in California?
I'm not sure. So he had 3 unauthorized businesses. He had the Little Bear Creek gold mine, a car dealership with a warehouse filled with vehicles in Tehachapi, and a Christmas tree farm called Ambria Acres Christmas Tree Farm. All of the ventures came out just a few days before his October 8, 2019 parole hearing, and that kind of fucked him, because they were like, hi, he's not responsible enough to even talk to the warden about his business ventures, so why do we think he's learned anything? He's just skirting the rules.
And who caught on to that, I wonder?
Oh, we get there.
Okay. Woods had been trying to keep his businesses quiet. However, Michael Bianchi, who managed aspects of all 3 businesses, injured his back, neck, and shoulder in the Little Bear Creek mine.
There you go.
Oh. Due to his injuries, Michael needed surgery, but when he tried to collect compensation from Woods, Michael was told that it was not Woods' problem. Bianchi filed a claim with the State Workers' Compensation Board. Because of this, the board had to determine whether Woods was truly hiring employees and running a business from prison. Michael was also working with Woods at the Christmas tree farm, and when it failed to turn a profit, Woods tried to sue his manager Bianchi for $1.5 million for failing to nurture the tens of thousands of trees Woods hoped to sell. Bianchi says the trees died because Woods ignored the first rule of farming, having an adequate water supply, which Woods failed to purchase. Despite the failure of both the mining and tree business, the car lot was thriving. He sold an old Rolls Royce for $100,000, and 2 of the vehicles in Woods' car inventory are the twin vans in which the kidnapped children were in, according to Michael Bianchi.
That's fucked. Like, he kept those as a memento and goes, I'm better now.
The fact that he could even have them or still have his name on the title to them is appalling to me, because when he went to prison, they should have made him relinquish all that stuff and pay any kind of money or assets he had to the families that have to put their children in counseling.
That's a good point.
And if his family and everybody is all rich and he has all this money, I don't understand why the parents of these 26 children didn't sue him for the trauma. Michael says Woods has kept the old vans with the expectation that the notoriety of Chowchilla will make the vehicles worth a lot of money. It is also believed that Woods inherited around $100 million from his wealthy parents, and some speculate that the money has helped finance some of Woods' prison activities, like his 3 disciplinary infractions for possession of pornography and 2 for possessing cell phones. He's also kept busy romantically, having married 3 women while incarcerated, and he's been keeping an eye on the real estate market. Are you kidding?
Nope. And then he's like, why won't they release me? What the fuck? I don't know. Woods, maybe because you don't follow the rules.
Well,
sir.
I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with parents giving their children money, but that should be in a canteen, and there's a certain amount. Like, I'm not as familiar, but I am familiar with inmates talking to me through the years, because, you know, I would take care of inmates. So they would tell me they could only have a certain amount. A certain amount every month can be sent, only a certain amount from each person. It's not like you can have millions of dollars in your canteen. How is he funneling all this money, and how is he spending this much time on the phones doing it?
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, okay, well, he also managed to start 3 businesses from prison, so who knows?
But the mail is watched. He had to obviously sign forms.
I do wonder if when maybe like one of his buddies came to see him, if he like slipped a note.
I mean, I don't know the California prison system, but most of the time, like, they frisk you. You can't take anything in, not a paper, not nothing, unless we had a dirty attorney.
There were a lot of things that were a little suspicious in this case, especially when we get to the parole board section. Speaking of keeping an eye on the real estate market, Woods bought an ocean view home in Como, which sits mostly vacant some 30 minutes down the road from his prison, and was appraised at $1.5 million. At the beginning of 2022, he sold another property his family owned in Martha's Vineyard for $550,000.
Wow. And you know that island is rich. You know, had that house stayed empty, maybe we could have put the 50 immigrants there that were flown over there against their will.
You would hope, but it's not lucrative, so we're not doing it. Past parole hearings have obviously found that Woods was evasive, unable or unwilling to follow prison rules, and failing to acknowledge the severity of his crimes, and all of this information was presented in court to see if Woods should be allowed on parole, and ultimately, at that time, he was denied. Quote, despite his age, Mr. Woods is still committing his criminal behavior. He chooses not to follow the rules of this institution, unquote, said the board chairman. As of 2022, Woods was the only member of the kidnapping group who was incarcerated at that time. But actually, while I was researching this, there was a parole hearing where Woods said he was a changed man. So, he says, quote, I was 24 years old. Now I fully understand the terror and trauma I caused. I take full responsibility for this heinous act, said Woods. So, when he said this, and when I was doing my research, guess who was able to be let go?
No way.
Yep, yes way. He's on parole, farting around in California.
I mean, like, here's the thing. If I was to look at it from an overall view without my feelings, he spent over 40 years even though it was dumb and all these kids suffered, and I'm sure they've suffered a lot through the years, this is PTSD, like this is trauma, right?
For sure.
But the intentions of these kids in the beginning, I call them kids because they're under 26, your brain's not formed. It was very childish, but they didn't have the direct intent to hurt them. I'm sure their direct intent wasn't to kill them, hurt them. Obviously, they thought they were going to get $5 million and then probably go open the door and let these people out is my guess. I don't know. But California let this man in a controlled environment in prison run 3 businesses for 40 years, basically. So how can we say that that's his fault if California is letting that mail come through, letting him sign these papers, letting him talk on the phones that are monitored? I'm not saying he's innocent, but how can we blame him when he has no other choice in life but to sit in a prison? If he's allowed to do it, he's going to do it.
See, my argument against that is he did know. Like, he was not respecting the rules of prison. It seems like he thought he was above the rules. So I see where you're coming from and I understand your argument, but to me at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if I went out and stabbed someone and I got away with it, I still stabbed someone. I still did something shitty. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I just feel like it's a poor
the whole thing
system.
Like
there's so many millions of inmates in these prisons. If we're letting all of them do things like this, how are we fixing the problem or teaching them they need to follow the rules? There's no way you could tell me for 4 decades that the mail system, the prison system, the wardens, the deputies, all of them, none of them knew this guy was doing this stuff.
He does not seem that sneaky, for sure.
Exactly.
So some people speculate that if that is true, that he really does take responsibility, he understands, gains some empathy, whatever, why would he be so resistant to the law? Kind of like what we were just talking about.
Like, basically, why didn't he just ask the warden for permission for these 3 businesses? Because if California allowed it,
he could do it. Yeah. I don't know if he was just being greedy to avoid taxes or just...
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah, like, that makes sense. Maybe it would be controlled and the money wouldn't go to where he wanted it to go.
Yeah, that's kind of my speculation. It also came out in a newly discovered letter from 1976 that at the time of the crime, Woods was already planning another scheme to have the movie made about the crime. So that's why I'm saying, like, of the 3 men, he seemed like he gave the least fucks and he was just in it for the money. Yeah.
But he wouldn't get that, right?
No.
Isn't there a new across the country law?
It's the Son of Sam law, where you cannot profit off of a crime.
Which is wonderful, because I'm sure that these kids could be 50 to 60 years old. They can benefit in some way from this trauma that they went through. Money. Yeah. Absolutely. I think it should be split between them until there's no more.
I completely agree. Woods wrote a letter to a friend saying, quote, "I think it would make a damn good movie of the week, if not a feature. It's big. Real big, and a hot item everybody wants to know about. If you do make it into a film, all I want is a % of it," unquote. Wow. Like, he's so money grubby. Gary Dubkoff, Woods' lawyer in San Francisco, urged earlier in 2022 that Woods be paroled. He argued in part, quote, "It is unconscionable. Thank you, God. Unconscionable that Mr. Woods remains incarcerated some 43 years after his offense. Period. Apart from the commitment offense, he has no history of violence, whether before prison or in it. He is an elderly inmate, fast approaching 70, and clearly presents no danger to anyone," unquote. Sure.
I don't believe that.
But I don't think he intends to physically attack anybody, but danger can still be mental trauma.
And he didn't physically hurt anybody when he committed that crime, and he needed money, so what's going to stop him at 70 from getting his little posse together and doing the same thing? He doesn't have to physically hurt someone to, use his millions of dollars to get someone else.
He already had people wrapped around his finger in prison. So.
Well, he had to have multiple. There's no way he was running 3 businesses without multiple people knowing what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. He has been recommended for parole as of 2022, and some believe that this is due to the financial and political influence. In 1980, a panel of judges hearing the appeal ruled that the kidnappers would be eligible for parole. One member of this specific panel was Judge William Newsom, a strong believer in rehabilitation for felons.
After Judge Newsom retired, he became an outspoken advocate for the Chowchilla kidnappers, saying that the notorious crime was just a youthful stunt that had no vicious aspect to it. Judge Newsom lived long enough to see his son, Gavin, elected California's 40th governor. Now Governor Newsom will have the final say on whether Fred Woods is ever successful in his bid for parole. And some of his victims are incredibly upset over the possibility of his freedom. Meanwhile, some victims are supportive of his release.
I've never met a Gavin that I liked. I just want to go on record and say.
I met a Gavin that I loved. He was a nurse that I worked with and had a huge heart. Very nice guy.
I'm very glad that you found one, but I've met 3 in my life and none of them rubbed me the right way.
Well,
sorry,
there's
Gavins.
a Gavin that's near and dear to my heart, and he made a very good impact on me, and he's super nurse.
We love this one off Gavin. Props to you.
Minus the Gavin I know. The psychological effects of being taken hostage at gunpoint and then kept underground for nearly 20 to 28 hours have been harrowing for many. Quote, "I'm 50 years old, and I can have an anxiety attack over getting in the car with my husband," end quote, said survivor Jennifer Brown Hyde. Another survivor.
I'm a survivor.
That sounded southern. Another survivor. Oh my God!
I'm a survivor.
You know what it is? You know why I'm doing that? Because I'm
Darla.
reading. Yeah, I'm reading like
Survivor Darla.
my mouth isn't going as fast as my brain.
You
Okay.
got this.
Another survivor, Darla Neal, told CNN in 2015 that she deals with crippling anxiety to the point that she had to leave work, quote, due to the anxiety. She also has said, quote, "I tell myself I should be able to shake this off and deal with it. Yet here I am, a mess," end quote. And so that's why I said earlier, I feel like they should have depleted all of these assets, all these accounts, and they should have split that between these 26 or 27 for the bus driver survivors. And they should be able to use that money for counseling, or, you know, somebody can't work because this has crippled her. It should be able to pay off her house. It should be able to give them a little retirement nest egg or something. He should not have millions and millions of dollars in businesses and assets, and these people are suffering for decades.
Out flipping houses and doing whatever the hell because he can. And these people need therapy because of him. Yeah.
I just feel like if you're going to let him go, let him go. But you know what? All that money and all those assets should go to the people that you harmed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless of all the illegal activities that he participated in while incarcerated and all the lives that his actions affected, because it's not just the 26 or 27 people.
Nope.
Their kids went through watching their parents suffer or listening to this. The parents of the children suffered with, do I let my kid go on the next school trip? Do I even let my kid go to school from now on? Because I could imagine with my children, I would never let them go anywhere again.
No.
I would be scared to death.
Mm-hmm.
He was ultimately granted parole as of August 17th, 2022. And we're talking California, so maybe avoid any bus trips for a little while.
Maybe wait until we see his obituary somewhere. There are a lot of pictures regarding this case that we will be posting to our social media at CX3_podcast on Instagram. And we have a blog that we're going to post all those pictures to.
And don't forget, we have the website, cx3podcast.com, and we can post up the original paper where they were actually handwriting their plan of what they were going to do, which is, unique.
Smart. Thank you guys for joining us, and if you like this content, please feel free to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're currently listening, and it's really helpful to leave a review on either Podchaser, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, because it really helps us to figure out what's working for you and what you want to see changed.
Hey, Shay, don't forget, we're starting our first giveaway, so for all of our listeners who are still listening,
we have our season hint. It's C, letter C.
Like cat, letter C.
Our DMs are always open on Instagram too, because we really like to chit chat with you guys. So if you want to offer suggestions, story ideas, or just say hi, we respond to everybody because we really, really love this little community that you guys are helping us build.
And we want lots of positivity and helpful stuff. We love constructive criticism, but let's all keep it happy because,
we're willing to pivot. But we need to pivot gently, okay? This is our safe space. Like Jen said, we have our website, cx3podcast.com. That has our blog, our backlogged episodes, and more just like random super fun stuff.
Have a safe day and always watch your back.